Well, welcome to the Community College Founders, about 30th anniversary. It was about 1988 or thereabouts when Dallas Herring, the chairman of the state board previously, decided he'd need to be around some friends, and he invited a bunch to be part of this old-timers group, as they called them, and we started out at the old campus, Wake Tech. Later, when Dallas got more feeble, John Tart took the ball, and several years we had it in Johnson Community College or down at the barbecue place, Wimmer's in Goldsboro, for a number of years. And then for the last few years, I've kept it going. And well, I'll talk more about something else later. But last year, I appointed an advisory committee of 6 of us. And our first mission was to find somebody to help do this. And guess who was selected? We couldn't have had a better person than Clark Adams. Clark has just taken us to a new level, and you can see already some of the results of that. And photos, I don't, that's unbelievable that he has been able to find the information and then display it as he has here about every single president or director since the beginning is up here with a picture. He tried his best at Wayne to get Marshall a little better picture, but at least it's his likeness. Clark, again, thank you so much. So now, excuse me, now I'd like to introduce Bill Aiken, the interim president here at Wake here, as well as Wake Tech Community College. This is the Scott campus. Fairly newly appointed or named that, and Bill Aiken has been around a while, and you got a big job here, and I'd like to have you welcome us.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Porter. I would tell the ones of you that don't know me well, I have one mission in life. I told the former president this. I have now been at 7 different institutions, and my goal in life is to get to all 58, so I have 51 left to go. I would also tell you that this is not exactly the way this was planned. When I first heard about this meeting, I assumed that I would be one of you sitting there, and Steve Scott would be here welcoming you to Wake Tech. And it so happens that it didn't quite work out that way. Steve's out there and I'm up here. But I am very pleased to welcome you to Wake Tech along with Steve Scott. We welcome you to this campus. We take very seriously our role in economic development in Wake County, and I'm sure your institutions do as well. So we welcome you here. I would invite you to visit any of the programs on this campus or any other campus to see the exciting things that are going on. I've done my best to try to get around. The first day I was here, I determined that I should try to visit every location. We went 100 miles, we walked 5 miles, and I still had 3 places I didn't get to. So it's a busy place, but I'm pleased to be here, and we certainly do welcome you here as well.
Thank you, Dr. Aiken. We're pleased to welcome in our midst Ms. Jennifer Haygood, who is Chief of Staff and Executive Vice President for our community college system. A couple of days ago, I was showing my daughter, who just retired from Wayne Community College, a program, and she was looking it over. She says, well, you've got Ms. Haygood, Jennifer Haygood on the program. I said, yes. She said, I know of her. She's an outstanding leader in our system. And you have been. I've heard a lot of great things about the work that you've done in our system in recent times. And glad to have you with us, and welcome. Thank you.
Well, good morning. It's so excited to see the legacy of our system here gathered in a room. It's an honor to be here with you. I know that you had great hopes of meeting our new system president, Peter Hans, today, and I am here, unfortunately, as your consolation prize, bringing you his regrets. Unfortunately, he is stuck in an airport somewhere and was not able to be here. But he will definitely, I'm sure, be here next year if you all gather again, and he definitely sends his greetings. I thought that in reflection of you gathering today, that it might be of interest to you all to know that there's a lot of faces that I know because they are recent retirees or former presidents, but you know there's a lot of folks who are going to be joining your ranks. And I thought it might be of interest to you all to know that since January 1, 2015, 35 college presidencies have turned over within our system, either or are planning to turn over. 35 since January 1, 2015. We have 8 colleges who are currently searching. I take that back, 7, because Davidson County Community College just wrapped up their search just a couple weeks ago. But we have 7 colleges that are currently searching. So there will be more folks joining your ranks in the next year or so. It's a dynamic time within our system, no doubt, and that turnover in leadership is definitely contributing to that fact. I think I would be also remiss if I didn't just ask that you all keep our colleges in the East in your prayers. As you may know, 20 of our colleges are located in a FEMA-declared disaster county, 20 of them. As of this morning, all of them have opened except for one, which is Cape Fear Community College, who we hope will be able to open next Monday. But this is unprecedented for our system in the breadth and severity, and we had multiple colleges who were closed for multiple weeks. So you can imagine that we are having to think creatively about how to help our colleges, help our students. For those of you all who remember those days, it has been one of my main jobs is to assure everyone that Programmata is not going to come beat on them. Those days have changed, but we will be launching probably in the coming days an opportunity for those who want to contribute to our system so that we can give some funds to our local colleges so that they can provide some financial assistance to our students who we are desperately trying to retain, or if they are not able to stay enrolled, can quickly re-enroll next semester. So please do keep them in your thoughts and prayers. But again, it is most impressive to see you all as leaders gathered together today. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to join you.
Thank you, Jennifer. We're in good hands. At this time, I'd like for us to focus on our beginning. The IECs, the Wade Martin years. And I guess the first photo that was displayed today was of Wade Martin, who served as the first director of the IEC program and left to head up South Carolina's program in 1962. At this time, I'd like to introduce anyone who was employed in an industrial education center. Several of you were initially employed at an industrial education center. And if you were, I'd like for you to stand, and Clark has a portable mic, and we'd like to get your name and the IEC you were employed and what year. So anybody, IEC employees?
Harvey Haynes, AB Tech. Harvey Haynes.
What year was that, Harvey? 62? What year was that?
61.
61. Haven Up Church.
I was employed at Central Lee County Industrial Education Center in March of 1962.
That was a long time ago, wasn't it?
Travis Martin. I was employed at Goldsboro Industrial Education Center in 1961.
Hello, President, but I'm Mabel Howell, and I was employed at the North County Industrial Education Center in March of 1964.
Dixon Hall, Goldsboro Industrial Education Center from 62 to 63. Fred Merely was employed in 1963 at the Industrial Education Center in Lexington, or Davidson County. And I came here from Chicago, working in the engineering office, and someone called me and said they wanted me to come down and teach their afternoon there. And so I came down and I just thoroughly enjoyed working there and being a community college system. Thank you.
Bill, what did Bill Sinclair say to you when you first met him? Ben Sinclair, the first director.
I don't know who called me in that engineering office. They talked to my boss and said, told him they wanted me to come down there, and he let me go, and I drove down to Lexington, and I arrived at Bill Sinclair's residence, and when I came in, he said, "You get on the couch and lay down, I'm going to fix you a steak."
That's a good story. Thank you. Anyone else employed in an industrial education center? Okay, the other thing I'd like to see is how many of you, if you are a first-time attender of this organization, please rise. First time you've attended. Some more good work, Clark. Thank you. I've been trying to get the first employee of the Industrial Education Center to come to this. She's still doing well, but just hasn't worked out for her to come. It's Sunshine Bishop, who lives in Reedsville, Bill Simpson's territory. I've kept in touch with her and make sure I call her every year and invite and hope she could come. But there were 3 people that were employed in the first IEC that was open, Leesville Spray. And Sunshine Bishop was one of those 3 that was first employed in May of 1958. And she's the only living one now. So she's the only living person that was first employed in our system. So I just wanted to mention that, and that's noteworthy, and I wish she could be here, but I'm gonna call her and tell her that we did announce this. And Sunshine Bishop. She married a long-time board chair at Rockingham Community College, Welsford Bishop. Is that right, Bill? Building named after him. Yeah. Okay, Clark, anything else on this line? Is that about covered? Well, I got a script, so I won't run on too much. I'm about to get carried away then. Okay, next is Clark. You're on, Clark. He's going to give us an update on the Archives Association, which Clark helped start that organization a couple of years ago. He'll tell us when. But I know a lot of people that know our history, And I don't know of anyone who can call names and know our history as well as Clark Adams. And we're grateful for what he has done and what he's got in process of doing for us and making sure we don't forget where we came from. And that's part of this organization, looking back where we came from. Clark?
Just want to take a few moments to talk with you about a statewide association that was, the idea of which started in 2016, but it has come to fruition more so solidified this year. I was here last September and talked a little bit about what I'm going to share with you today, but I want to update you on a couple of items related to that. The history of the community college system is now largely housed throughout our 58 institutions. And so I want to share with you a little background on how this all began. I first started working with our Dean of Library Services at Randolph Community College in 2005 to establish a college archives collection to document the history of Randolph Community College. And through that period of time, we also celebrated 2 anniversaries on our campus and used many of the historical materials there. Throughout the period of 2007 to 2012, I visited many campuses throughout the state to see how well they had preserved and maintained their college histories. We also began working at Randolph with the North Carolina Digital Heritage Center, which is a great resource, has a great website, and many catalogs from these campuses and yearbooks have been scanned where you can see them digitally, and that's a great resource. I was fortunate to serve on the 50th anniversary committee with several of the people in this room in 2013, and then we brought some other people on the board to assist us with this project. And we began to see if others throughout the state were interested in preserving the history of the system, and again, primarily on their own campuses. We had our first planning meeting December of 2016 on Randolph's campus. Several people in this room were there at that meeting. George Fouts spoke at our meeting that afternoon, a little bit about the history of the system, but also about the reason for preserving it. One of the things that George and I discovered when we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the system in 2013 is that nearly all of the historical materials at the system office are no longer there. And I'm just going to have to be truthful about that. But so now it's up to the individual institutions to preserve what's at their campuses. And so that's the whole program and plan there. So the question was, do we need a statewide group to make sure that these materials are saved and preserved? And we also wanted to provide some professional development. Now, largely the group that is working with this project are librarians throughout the campuses. Largely what happens is college historical materials are either in the college libraries or they're in a marketing department. In some cases, they're scattered all over the campus. And many of these schools have yet to establish a centralized location to document their beginnings and as we go forward. So that was our purpose in asking that question. We surveyed all of the librarians throughout the system. And this is our mission and what we're all about. Right now, I'm pleased to say that we have members from nearly every institution in the system interested, the 58, and we're growing. This is a little bit more information. I'm not going to belabor you too much because I realize that there are about 2 or 3 of us that stand between you and lunch right now. One of them is Raymond Stone, and so we know that he'll be up soon. But this is our purpose and mission, really to say, what can we preserve throughout the 58 institutions that has not already been discarded, lost, destroyed, and so on, and in really advocating for this across the state. So the challenges that exist for colleges now who are trying to maintain and preserve their historical materials, whether it be college catalogs, yearbooks, Board of Trustee minutes back to the early years, Faculty Senate minutes, other campus publications and records, there's a lack of staff. Many school libraries have maybe 1 or 2 staff at best, especially in our smaller schools. There's a lack of dedicated space, and often it's not a priority in many institutions. People often struggle with the time to be able to actually devote to working on this in addition to their other responsibilities. And one of the big ones is a lack of training. Many people say, well, what do I do with all this? I don't really know how to best manage these materials and how to catalog them and inventory them and so on. So last year we got on the presentation train and we went to the Society of North Carolina Archivists annual conference in Asheville. We told our story there. We also told our story to the North Carolina Community College Library Association conference at Morehead City last March, a year ago. And Ms. Howell, I believe, was there, and so was Dr. Cook, so several people here were at that event. At the North Carolina Library Association Biennial Conference in Winston-Salem last fall, we also presented, and then on August the 2nd of this year, we had our installation of officers at UNC Chapel Hill at the Wilson Library. Several folks, again, who are here today were there. Parker Chesson was at that meeting, as you see him on the second row at the top, and Dr. Harry Cook from Gaston College was also there. We had a chance to tour the University Archives at Chapel Hill and get some knowledge from their staff, and also tour their Digital Heritage Center, which is on campus, and see how they digitize and make available a lot of historical materials. This is our current executive board for 2018 and 19 as it stands at this time. We are still working on appointing about 2 positions to this board, but the first 4 of these positions was elected on August the 2nd, and the bottom 3 were appointed soon thereafter. I'm thankful to have Dr. Parker Chesson on that board. He keeps up with y'all very well, and certainly has a lot of knowledge of the scope of the system from 1964 forward. Is that correct? Okay, he says that's correct. Okay. So our fall 2018 plans with what's left of this year, we are going to be spending some time getting some professional development for our members at South Piedmont Community College on the Polkton campus in November, late November. We're going to also be getting some training for our members of the organization at UNCG in December, and also next spring at Asheville-Buncombe Technical College, where the North Carolina Community College Library Association Conference will be held in March of 2019. So how can you play a role? There's many of you here who go back to the early days. If there's something that you want to share, any historical materials that you still possess that you would like to pass on to our organization, old photographs, historical documents that you may be going through and cleaning out or getting rid of, we'd be happy to take those and collect them for you, and we are depositing many of our materials that we obtain in the state archives. That's our focus with what we have. If you'd like to participate in an oral history project, I know Dr. Porter at one time had discussed the idea of doing some interviews with you all who'd be interested in telling about your early years with the system. And basically just advocate for our mission. And you can definitely join us. There is no membership fee. Okay, so if you're interested in and would like to be a part of this, we welcome you to join our efforts. And we definitely need all the support we can get for really selling the importance of this throughout the various institutions. So thank you for your interest and support. And I had to include the website there. We do have a web page. In fact, I'm not sure if I can get it to come up. We'll see. That's incidentally a photograph of Jack Ballard at Central Carolina Community College. This is our website. Real quickly, I'll just show you a couple things. We have resources, best practices, archival organizations, where to get supplies for these materials, our meetings and conferences, our various collections throughout the state, training, how we got started, news of other professional development. So there's a lot we're trying to do, but we are just really getting off the ground this year and looking forward to keep pressing forward. So thank you for your time. And by the way, just think about it this way. The majority of each one of you is a part of this archive. In fact, all of you are. You're part of the story. So you are involved in this any way you look at it. Thank you so much.
Well done, Clark. Thank you. It just occurred to me, it seems like Swindale or Reed, did Swindale give you some letters from the first director of IECs? So they are preserved, and Clark, you can, that would be good to have. Some letters that Wade Martin wrote.
No, they were actually letters from Russell to Dallas area, from Dallas back to Russell to me.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see.
And they were letters and it was history.
Yeah. Okay. Some other things that might be in the archives. Okay, there is still in existence a North Carolina Association of Community College Presidents, if that's the correct name. And if you want to know how it started, we got Raymond Stone to tell you. And Raymond, come on up. Raymond's a close friend. I first knew him in July of 1960 when he came to be with us with Dr. Reedy and the few that worked for the state board, and has been a good friend ever since.
Thank you,
Raymond got a long pedigree. I won't get into it. I'll let you talk about it.
You've been sitting there a long time. Why don't you everybody stand up for a moment? Some of y'all may have known a lady by the name of Betty McCain. She's the one that told me you ought to give every speaker a standing ovation. It gives you a chance to straighten your underwear. By the time I finish, you may be wanting to run me out, so I won't ask you to give me a standing ovation. As reference has already been made, the IECs got started in 1957 when Dallas Heron and Luther Hodges put their heads together and got the act through the General Assembly. I think they created 7 or 8 at that time, and more were added in 58, 9, 60, and so on. When the 61 session ended, Governor Sanford formed a commission called the Carlisle Commission to study education beyond the high school. There was a real fight for money between the university, that is Chapel Hill, Raleigh, and Greensboro, and the other colleges like East Carolina, West Carolina, and Appalachian, and so on. And so this commission was formed to study education beyond the high school. They made 2 recommendations. One, to create the Board of Governors of the university, but Bill Friday made an awful mistake. He wanted the NC State name, the NC State University of the University of North Carolina at Raleigh. Ralph Scott said, "Oh, my damn dead body." So for 8 years, they fought from 63 to 71 when Bob Scott was governor and got it passed. So the NC State would be university. They created the Board of Governors and named Bill Friday the first president and so on. But the second recommendation was to create a community college system, a comprehensive system. At that time, there were 5 public junior colleges, Elizabeth City, Wilmington, 2 in Charlotte, and 1 in Asheville. And there was an 2-year engineering school in Gastonia and a 1-year trade school there. Under that Community College Act, they put all of that together, made SEAL, the Albemarle, a community college. They created Charlotte College and Wilmington College and Asheville College, which today, of course, is part of the university system. But they also appropriated $2.5 million for the first 5 community colleges, $500,000 each. And so we had a great effort during Terry Sanford's years. That's when the community college system was created, May 17, 1963. And then for 6 or 8 months, I went to at least 20 of your institutions and met with legislators and others to get your industrial education center, technical institutes, community college to get started in the state. Well, Governor Dan Moore came in as governor in 65. The state treasurer was then Edwin Gill. Edwin Gill did not like Terry Sanford. Edwin Gill was from Laurinburg. When Edwin Gill himself told me, when I first saw Terry Sanford, he was a little blonde-headed, barefooted boy running around in Laurinburg. And now he's governor and I'm still state treasurer, and so on. So that in 1965, Dan Moore's chief advocate for education was Edwin Gill. He said to the governor, let's cut back those community colleges and technical institutes and IECs. They're growing too fast. They're getting too big for their britches. And in fact, there was a slash in the appropriations in 65. Well, Mert Branson, who was then head of the Technical Institute over at Randolph, called me and said, Raymond, I had been named president of Sand Hills, which was the first community college recognized by the state board. And I had been named president January 1st, 64. he said, Raymond, why can't we get these presidents together, all these IECs, Technical Institute folks together, community college people together, and let's see can't we make a statement to the General Assembly? So Mert Branson and I met at a restaurant in Siler City, which was about halfway between Moore County, I was then president of Sandhills Community College, and Asheboro. And so we met, and then we somewhat like, as I already said here today, we had people to call, and we got in touch with each IEC director, I believe they were called, Technical Institute, and community college people that were in existence at that time. And we came to Raleigh and met at the Heart of Raleigh Motel, which was there 2 or 3 blocks southeast of, or southwest, I guess it was, southwest of the Sir Walter Hotel on Morgan Street, I believe, in Raleigh, and so on. So we met for the first time there at the Heart of Raleigh Motel in '65. And then they recognized me as chair. We named Gerald James, who was at Rockingham, secretary. Frankly, I don't believe we had a vice chair or a treasurer. We didn't really need any money, somewhat like Clark was saying that a while ago about the effort to preserve. And so we met and organized, and we went before the state board, and also we worked directly with our legislators. And in '67, Governor Dan Moore had a turnaround. He advocated a strong increase in appropriations for community colleges and technical institutes because by that time, nearly every industry in this state was dependent on them. And people like Charlie McCreary from Asheboro and Charlie Rose from Fayetteville and Dallas Heron down in Rose Hill and so on. Across the state, they were recognizing how much industry needed training. Governor Hodges got the IEC started because he saw the state changing from an agricultural economy to an industrial economy, and the people were not skilled enough to occupy these high-paying jobs in industry, and so on. And in fact, that is still a continuing need 50 years later today, and so on. So that's how we got started. And then I'll just add a word. A couple of years later, the trustees broke away from the National School Boards Association and formed the American Association of Community College Trustees, and then we got started here in North Carolina. The first president was a Thompson guy from Fayetteville. I can't think of his first name. Some of y'all may help me later. He died almost instantly. The second president was Dr. Humber from Pitt, and he died almost instantly. Well, the next guy in line was Cliff Blue from our school at Sandhills. He said, I don't know whether I want the job or not, if it's going to kill me. But at any rate, the trustees got organized, I'd say in '67 or '69, or certainly by 1970, and so on. And that's why we are what we are today, I think, a real force to work with our state board, to work with the legislators. But I will tell you this. Billy Watkins and I were classmates at Wake Forest, and he was a power in the legislature. In the '89 session, he said to me, Raymond, I am damn tired of all these technical institutes wanting to become community colleges. I said, Billy, there needs a solution to that. Why don't you put it in the law, let them all be community colleges? But put also in the law that they've got to offer at least 51% vocational and technical courses. And so many of you became community colleges maybe after that. But the State Board of Community Colleges was created in 1979 by the legislature to take effect in 1981, and we became the State Board of Community Colleges in 1981. Let me say, being a part of the community college system has been the highlight of my life. And now, as a 91-year-old, I'm very proud to say that I was there in the beginning. Some of us wrote the act, and the governor said to me, it's your baby, deliver it. And I had to push it through the legislature. We had one vote against it. Roger Kaiser, who was a school teacher from Scotland County, he was afraid he was going to hurt the two-year junior colleges. I said to him, Mr. Kaiser, there's enough ignorance in North Carolina to go around. And so we got the act passed. And then for 6 months, it was my job to go about the state, primarily at the invitation of legislators, what can we do to get one for our county? What can we do to get one for our county? And so at least 20 of your institutions were gotten started about that time. And so it's been the joy of my life. I'm now in retirement, and what a joy. Thank you, Clark, for what you're doing. Thank you, Herman. Herman and I think were the only two probably in the room who were there in 1963. Is anybody else at the state level in 63? It's been the joy of my life, I'll tell you that.
Well, it's a joy, and it comes through, Raymond, loud and clear. I mentioned earlier that I didn't know anyone who knew more history with names and what's happened in our system than Clark Adams. And we have in our midst a 91-year-old who has lived that history. He knows a lot of names, a lot of things that went on, and was part of it. And it was my, it was some hard work, but we had some fun in the 1960s and early on. Yes? Well, if we have time.
I'd like to say I became President Wilson technical, whatever it was, in 1982. I got a letter from my cousin, Joe Eagles, who had been liaison to Governor Hines, saying, I'll tell you how happy I am that you become the president, but I also want to share with you that you almost didn't exist as an institution, because when the information was presented to whatever committee it was, they said there was nowhere in Wilson that was available to have a community college. And Cousin Joe said to Governor Hodges, give him 24 hours, and they found our location. Also, superintendent schools, like your Kaiser, they said, we don't need that in Wilson. But anyway, I thought that was interesting.
Okay, thank you, Frank.
That location was in the basement of City Hall in Wilson.
That reminded me of some other stories, but in the Industrial Education Center program, as Raymond indicated, started with the legislation in 1957, setting up area vocational schools geared to the federal support. And then I had it cut off. They probably want to sell me something. Sorry. What was I talking about? Yes, it was the legislation was passed in 57, and then before the board could get things going and gathered and identify some locations for industrial education centers and have them apply, it was April 3rd, 1958, when 6 were located. And then a week or two later, Wilson came into play after the politics you just spoke of came about. So then there were 7 industrial education centers initially in 58, and then it grew from there. And we have another guy in our midst that has lived a lot of our early history, and it's Dixon Hall, and he's going to come forward, Dixon, and tell us how things were in the early days. While he's coming up, Harley Affelt, who remembers Harley Affelt from Forsyth? He knows firsthand what a tough time it was with the IECs in the early days. You see, Forsyth was one of those early IECs, and they got the equipment and the instructors from the county schools and brought that all together at Forsyth to make a really nice industrial education center with a lot of high school students. Well, then we wrote the law and cut out high school students. We ended up adjusting that law, Raymond, a little bit to phase the law in so that it wouldn't abruptly knock out the high school students. But when that happened, Harley, if he was here, he'd tell you, and he wanted to come and almost did, he would tell you that was some tough times. He had all this equipment, all this resources now here, and the principals were mad at us because you took us. Now you're not going to take our students. So he was right in the middle of it, and he has a good story to tell about that. Well, we have Dixon Hall, who started out, as he said earlier, at Wayne Community College, but it was an industrial education center in 1962 with H.B. Monroe was not there in 62. Okay. But H.B. Monroe, but preceding him, but he'll tell us about the industrial education centers in the early days. And Dixon, good to have you. He was at James Front, helped start that, and was there for, 12 years or so?
Well, my family was in iron and steel. My wife ironed. Raymond said he was going blind. Well, you know, the Bible talks about that. Said if you look at a woman with lust in your eye, pluck your eye out. You see all these men wearing glasses. Russell Swindell was a lobbyist for the Railroad Association, and Ned Delamar was a lobbyist for us. And they would report in to Dallas every often, and they were reporting in the good news about the votes they were getting for the funding for the community college system. And Dallas said we ought to make him a doctor's degree. So I printed Ned Delamar an honorary doctor's degree from James Front Institute. And Russell found out about it, he had to have him a doctor's degree. So we got David Henderson, the congressman, a few other people around, and we gave him a little ceremony and had an honorary doctor's degree for him. And I want you to know that that's all legal, buried in the North Carolina General Assembly somewhere, some law. It does give us the authority to give an honorary doctor's degree to anybody we want to. I can't find it, but I know that Ned Delamar and Russell Swindell made that happen. Now, the industrial education centers, Leroy Henderson was over at Onslow, and I remember people would come down on the beach, had IEC up there, they'd stop in wanting to buy some ice. But it was a hard sell. The public schools were against us. We were under the jurisdiction of the local superintendent, and he saw that building out there as an office space eventually for his office, and they didn't want us to succeed, and it was a tough sell. The curriculum was narrow. We had hardcore vocational programs, diploma programs. We trained licensed practical nurses and automobile mechanics and other power mechanics and construction trades. And then we had a big extension program. We trained volunteer fire and rescue people. And about 1964, about 20 industrial education centers. And the state press said, well, we've covered the state. Well, Dallas Heron was chairman of the State Board of Education, said you're missing over half the people. The country people get sick too, and they need nurses training programs, and they need mechanics and technicians, construction workers. So in the early days, now, every county had a different culture, a different leadership style. And I'd say my situation might be a little bit unique, because I went to work for H.B. Monroe, and Monroe was a World War II hero. He was in Pearl Harbor and hid under the barracks when they strafed the village. He flew 138 missions, got shot down. They picked him up, put him in the plane. He kept on flying. It's written up in the New York Times. And he didn't call a spade, he called it something else. But anyway, H.B. was a doer. He was active. And he went to work I went to work for him. He said, I don't care. You don't have to work but half days. It don't make a difference which 12 hours you work. And I was assigned 5 counties. I had Henry J. McGee, Major McGee down at Carteret, and I was assigned 5 counties: Wayne, Greene, Johnson, Sampson, Dupin. And I set up, called it extension classes. We were coordinators Nobody knew what a coordinator was, but I was a coordinator. And I'd go into the high schools, and we'd set up we'd hire the high school teachers to teach typing and bookkeeping. And we used the school's equipment and the textbooks, the same the students used. And I'd take a case of paper and put it in my car and a box of spirit duplicators, and we'd go into the principal's office, run off the announcements of the classes. And back then they had grades 1 through 12, union school, and we'd give it to first and second graders to take home to the parents. And it wasn't long before we had 1,000 students or more enrolled all over these counties. Well, I'd been there a long 4 or 5 months, and I was directed to report to Dallas Herring in Duplin County. Well, I didn't know Dallas Herring. I was 25 years old, and so I went down there. He said, well, HB had mentioned to me, said, would you like to start a new program down in Duplin County? I said, yeah, that'd be fine, but I didn't know much about it. I hadn't thought much about it. And a few days later, he said, you need to report right now to Dallas Herring in Rose Hill, North Carolina. So I went down there and had a photographer there. He and I took a picture. He had called the press to hold the presses. He'd written the press release, had me take it down to the editor, had a big spread. James Sprint Institute opened the doors, March 12, 1964. Well, we didn't have a trustee. And back then, we had somebody in charge. When I went down there, the county auditor had been there 37 years. His name was Faison McGowan, and he was also chairman of the Democratic Party for 37 years. And then Hugh Johnson, 3 doors down, that was Dallas's first cousin. He was chairman of the Rules Committee. He was a powerhouse in the General Assembly. So I'd report in, and they told me what to do, and I did it. And Dallas was the youngest mayor in the United States at age 23, former chairman of the local county school board, had organized and got money from the Kellogg Foundation to consolidate the schools. And he was a hero in that county, and he was a hero in reality. He was a statesman, he was a scholar, he was a classic. I remember I'd go to meetings with him, and he'd write something in Greek, remarks, you know. And I remember the State Board of Education, I was sitting behind him, and somebody had given him an award, and I said, that's mighty nice, Dallas. So he wrote something in Greek. Well, nobody in the whole building knew how to, education building knew how to read that Greek. So I went over to Meredith College, and I got the solution. It said there are 2 types that rise to the top, the cream and the bastards. But anyway, Dallas had the model, he had the authority, he had the prestige, the status, and the scholarship, and integrity. He'd never ask you to do anything for personal gain. So I'd go down there and I'd meet with the county auditor, member of the House, State House, Dallas Herring, chairman of the State Board of Education. And he said, what we're going to do, we had racism was a major problem. We had 2 water coolers in the courthouse. We believed in busing back then to keep everybody separate, you know. Racism was alive and well, and he didn't feel like we could carry a bond issue. So the political theory was he put a class in every voting precinct. There are 20 precincts in the county. So Hugh Johnson, the representative, gave me his precinct list with 3 or 4 people in each precinct that kind of carried that precinct back then. That was the way of politics. So I went to see all those people, and we put a class in every one of those 20 voting precincts. Did a lot with literacy education and extension and so on. And it got people swelled up, they had to have it. And we put the word out, said the state's going to furnish the teachers and the equipment and the supplies. We just need a shed to put it in. It's about a joint meeting of the county school board and the county commissioners. Now, this is all Dallas's brain power now, his influence, his leadership. I was a chauffeur, doorman, whatever, you know. And so they met, and Dallas explained it to them, solid support. Then we appointed an advisory committee, 1 person from each voting precinct. Dallas met with him, said, we don't need your advice, we need some salesmen to help sell this program. And they put it over. That's how we got it started. And the first appropriation was $265,000 for building. So it can't be an overrun. Can't be and we didn't have a bond issue. We straddled 2 years' budgets because it took 9 months to complete the building, so we gambled that the money would be there from the county commissioners. We started an LPN program. The State Board of Nurses was opposed to it, said we couldn't have a quality program because the hospital is too small. So Hugh Johnson, member of the General Assembly, called the chairman of the board in there and 2 or 3 people, and they met in the library. You know where the library is. Somebody been to the library, Dallas Harriet Library. I was there. He said, let me tell you something. If you don't approve a nursing school in my home county, I'm going to introduce the legislation to abolish the State Board of Nursing. So they started crying and went home and approved us 1-year probation. And the class average score was highest in the state on the state nursing board examination at the end of that year. So never heard any more about the quality of the program. It was a tough sell all over the state, IECs, and it wasn't easy. And I think a lot of these leaders from that era made it a lot easier for people who came in the community college system. Thank you. One other thing.
Dixon, looked like you could enjoy some food too. We all will. At this time, I'd like to call Dr. Parker Chesson. Parker is going to make some recognitions for us, and in addition to that, he's going to cover our memorials for the year. Parker, he's been around a long time and done a lot of stuff. He started out in '64 at College of Albemarle as a biology, I think, instructor. Later dean, then vice president, then president, and then somebody called him to Raleigh in about 1992 to be executive vice president for our system. You were working with, who brought you to Raleigh, Parker? Governor Scott, that's right, 1992. But anyway, he was that job, then he was at Employment Security Commission as commissioner, and in recent years, he has kept up with us, we who have retired, our name and addresses, and sort of keeps up through all of us how we're doing, and if we are doing. And some of us obviously don't as we age. But anyway, Parker, glad to have you to do this. Parker is the vice chairman of our committee, advisory committee for this organization, and thank you.
Herman, thank you for that introduction. It looks like from the agenda, I am the lone person standing between us and lunch, so I will try to keep this brief. First on a happy note, and then I'll get to the more sad news. Steve Scott, as you know, it's already been said, had retired. He's in our midst somewhere. I can't pick him out at the moment. Back that way in the back. And at the Wake Tech, they have established a Stephen Scott Scholarship Program. You should have recognized, those of you who have been to these for the last few years, this has been done, the meal has been provided, and there's not been a ticket charge or anything of that nature. And that's been through the graces of Steve Scott and Wake Tech. And we talked about a way to maybe recognize that, to thank him for that. And the idea we came up with was to possibly each of you make a contribution to that fund. I am going to send an email to each of you that has a link. If you know how to use a computer and click on that link, it will carry you to a page where you can make a contribution to Steve's fund. And if you do it at enough of a level, I don't know what the cutoff is, but Ed Wilson is wearing proof. I left mine at home. They are Carolina blue, and I guess it's almost Duke blue as well, socks. you get a nice pair of socks. But seriously, consider that. I will send you an email, and read, you need to read your email now, okay? Okay. And consider that. Now, on a sadder note, to the best of my knowledge, since we met last, 2 presidents or former presidents in this system have passed on. Not many in the room knew Bob Benson. I don't think Raymond did. Tom, you were probably around. Herman was around, and a couple of others. But he was the founding president at College of the Albemarle in 1961. He left in 63, went to Gaston College as founding president, and was there several years, and left there. I think he went into the university system in Tennessee and did a lot of other things. He passed away on January the 14th of this year at the ripe old age of 98. He left behind 6 children, 21 grandchildren, and 29 great-grandchildren, believe it or not. And his wife is still, of 75 years, is still living. But I met him once at a reunion we had at COA back in '85, I guess it was. He came to that. A very fine man, and had a great career. He was a veteran and involved in the D-Day invasion in Normandy, so he knew that side of life as well. Also, we lost just recently, in the last few months, Phil Wynn. Phil would have been out here in one of these chairs today. Absolutely. We had talked, and he said, I'm going to be there this year. On July the 24th, he passed away. Heart attack, sudden, at home, quite unexpected. He had a great career, 30 years or so at Durham Tech, 27 as president. He was the first African-American president in the system, and was a real fixture in Durham. I live in Durham. I've tried to keep up from a distance to politics and the social goings-on and that sort of thing. Phil was a firm part of that community. And I will tell you, when they had his funeral service on, I think it was about 27th, he filled Duke Chapel. It was a very impressive ceremony because the Durham Tech family, the Duke University family, which I'll mention again in a moment, and also the Durham community. In 2007, he decided to retire, and I don't know which came first, but I think the president at Duke had already talked to him. You remember the Duke lacrosse problem that Duke University had 10, 15 years ago. Community relations were really tough for that university for a while. And the president at Duke created a new vice presidency and brought Phil in to that position. He filled that for 10 years and did an outstanding job, just like he had done at Durham Tech. He retired on July the 2nd. And I know there are a few in this room that dabble around with Facebook, and Phil did, and I do. On July the 2nd, he posted a video, and I tried to find a way to get this up here today, but I couldn't figure it out. But the gist of the video was this. It was posted by Phil. Someone took with an iPhone, probably, of him leaving work on his last day. He was a Harley-Davidson motorcycle guy. If you picture the Duke Chapel up at the top of that screen, and the circle that goes around, that video shows Phil on his Harley, all of his gear on, slowly chugging around the circle in front of the chapel and off into the distance. And his post was this: my last day at Duke University and my ride off into the sunset. 22 days later, he did his final ride. Very sad, very sad. I am working with Bill Ingram. He asked me to, if I would, to speak to you about this. Some type of memorial fund will be established at Durham Tech, and I'm going to be sending some information on that as well. And if you feel willing, make a contribution to that. And that's the news I have, Herman. Thank you.
Appreciate that. I want to say a word. We've mentioned Clark Adams and what he's done for us, but you know he comes from pretty good stock. His daddy is here. Bill Edwards, you stand. Dr. Adams was employed at Davidson Industrial Education Center, or then Technical Institute, maybe, 1966, 9, and has been there or at Forsyth now part-time ever since, doing great things. And a recent the governor gave him one of those Order of Longleaf Pines not long ago. So that tells what lineage he has. And his father, Clark's grandfather, was an ag teacher for many, many years, who I knew of. And so he comes from some good stock. But again, we thank Clark for all he's done for us this year. This time, we're getting ready to go eat. Reed, will you come forward and bless the food for us? Reed, Nash County, you saw up here, he was about 20 years at Nash as president, and did an outstanding job.
Thank you, Harold. If you would bow your heads, please, in prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you in submission to praise you and give you thanks for the multitude of blessings you bestow on us each and every day. We thank you for friends, family, faith, and the gift of life. Father, we have meetings such as this one today to remember those who came before us. With vision, determination, and endurance, they were the architects of a plan for community colleges in North Carolina that has exceeded our expectations. We are in awe of where we are today and with the anticipation of where the system will be in the years to come. We thank you, Lord, for those of us who are here today, who were fortunate enough to have been a part of and to have enjoyed the great evolution in education. Now, as we remember those who are not, or who are with us in this movement, and not physically, but are here today, but surely are in spirit. Now, Lord, bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies and us to thy continued service. In thy holy name we pray. Amen.
We have as our speaker Phil Kirk. Phil Kirk has been around a while. I don't know of any person in North Carolina who has done more in service to our state than Phil Kirk in so many different ways. Hunt's been around a while and done a lot of things, but when I look at what Phil Kirk has done, I know of nobody in North Carolina that's done any more for our state than he has in government and then otherwise. I won't go through all of his resume. As he develops his talk about the 10 governors that he has known, many of whom he has worked with before, he'll reveal the positions he's had over the years. He was the youngest senator at the time, and maybe still holds the record, youngest senator ever elected in North Carolina. Is that record still hold true? Second. I forgot the age, 25. But anyway, I've just thoroughly enjoyed knowing Phil Kirk. He and I served on the State Board of Community College together. And I learned the wisdom that he has, but also how caring he was for other people. And I think they're two great characteristics of anyone. So Phil, without ado, please come forward.
Thank you. When I speak and people are still eating, I usually say, keep on eating, but chew with your mouth closed, if you would, so that we'll be able to hear. The acoustics in this room are not the best in the world, but I've never been accused of not talking loudly enough. So before I begin, I want to make sure that, because he's threatening to slip out early because he's got a meeting tonight in Falls Church, Virginia, to show how bipartisan Martin Lancaster and I are. Martin and I have gotten along real well because I'm the only one he can beat playing golf. But Martin, we're glad to have you with us today, and he told me not to talk long, so I won't. You know, as I looked at the pictures of all the community college presidents over time, as I've listened to the speakers this morning, I thought about changing my speech to the community college people that I have known, some of which I could tell in public. But I've decided that will be my next project, to work on that speech. So maybe in a couple of years, Herman, if you can't get a speaker again, you can have me come and give that one. All right, I'm going to talk fast if you'll listen fast, because we've got about 20 minutes. 10 governors I've known. You'll be glad to know that my speech has gotten longer and longer, so I eliminated all the serious parts, and I only tell the humorous parts about the governors. The second thing is, even though I used to be a newspaper reporter, I didn't make up any of these stories. They all actually happened. I didn't have to make up any. Terry Sanford was and I'm going to talk fast, as I said. Terry Sanford was the first governor I knew, and I was in high school at the time, East Rowan, president of the Teenage Republicans, and some of you may know Terry Sanford was a Democrat, and he was coming to our school to speak. So every morning for a week, the teacher rehearsed us on when we were to stand, when we were to applaud, and how we were to act when the governor came. Well, after a week of that, I finally raised my hand and I said, Miss Boyd, I think you stand for the office of the governor, which I, of course, will do, but I don't think you should be told when you have to clap. Those of you who know me know that I would have clapped anyway. I just didn't like being told when I had to clap. My mother happened to be the high school lunchroom manager at my school, and she heard about it before I got home, and rest assured I clapped every chance I had opportunity. I told Governor Sanford that one time, and he chuckled a little bit. Dan Moore, I didn't really know him very well. I actually knew his wife. We worked together on highway beautification and anti-litter campaign. I did read a book recently by Tom Eman, an East Carolina professor, that said Dan Moore was the most underrated governor in modern history. Bob Scott, now we know him with a lot of different hats on, and by the way, we won't have time for Q&A today, but I always tell an audience, don't ask me who was my favorite, because several of them are still living. But I do want to say to you that I thoroughly enjoyed working with Bob Scott. And I actually learned to know him, Herman, when I was in the legislature. As I said, was a Republican from Rowan County. The legislature and the governor were strong Democrats. But Governor Scott, back in the good old days of bipartisanship, you'll hear me refer to that a couple of times, Bob Scott put me on several committees and several boards. And some of the Democrats in my home county, to tell you the truth, they didn't like that. And so some of them called him and said, you're going to help him get reelected. He's going to be able to run for reelection and say, well, even the Democrat governor put him on some committees. Bob Scott allegedly said, and it sounds like Bob Scott, said, well, we got to have one Republican on each committee, and he's so young he can't get anything done. So, and it reminds me of a story about his wife, Jessie Ray, who had as good a sense of humor as Bob Scott did. She called me when I worked for Governor Holshouser, and she said, Phil, we want you to be on the American Cancer Society statewide board. She was the president. And I said, I'm sorry, Jessie Ray, I can't do that. Why? I said, I don't believe you should be on the state board if you hadn't been on the local board of whatever the group is. And I haven't. We just got to have you. And I said, why? She said, we got all Democrats on the board, and they told me we needed a Republican. So anybody talks to me about being a token, I've had plenty of experience with that. And I wasn't going to mention this because it's a serious one, but Raymond Stone mentioned about the creation of the UNC Board of Governors in 1971. Governor Holshouser was in the House at the time, and I was in the Senate. And we were the only two Republicans that were on the Joint Conference Committee that worked out the UNC Board of Governors and redid the system. And that's one of the most interesting things I've ever been involved with. Governor Scott suggested one thing to me that I didn't do, and I'm sorry to say that. He came down during the transition period. Governor Holshouser didn't have any Republicans with state government experience to hire because there weren't any that had worked in state government. Bob Scott literally, during the transition, came down to our office many times and told us little things to do and big things to do and how to organize the governor's office. He went way beyond the call of duty, and I never will forget that. But he said, Phil, every day when you get home, you're going to be tired. But take out a diary, start a diary and write down something each day. I didn't do it, and I wish I had. Of course, it couldn't be published until after I died, but he really helped us a lot. Jim Holshouser, you may remember Jim Holshouser was the first Republican governor in 100 years, and the last governor not to be able to run for a second term. So, and I'll comment on that in a minute. But he was a Davidson graduate and a UNC Law School graduate. At Reynolds Coliseum, at NC State, he had tickets at mid-court. By the way, I handled his schedule. It took him 4 years to figure out that I scheduled him out of town a lot during home games. But he did get to go to one game, and it was the Carolina State game. And I thought, what color is he going to wear? Well, being a good politician, he wore a blue coat the first half, went out and changed into a red coat the second half. But he was a good guy to work for. Jim Hunt, most people forget that Jim Hunt, a Democrat, was lieutenant governor when Jim Holshouser, a Republican, was governor. You know, in Washington, you have to run as a team. You can't vote for one from one party for president and one from another party for vice president. In North Carolina, we've had at least 3 times in modern history where the governor and lieutenant governor have been of different political parties. And there's usually a bill introduced to change that through the Constitution. But I've always subscribed to the Sam Ervin theory, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So we hadn't tried to fix that one yet. But Jim Hunt had aspirations to be more than a 4-year governor. He wanted to run for a second term, but he couldn't. So he had to get the Constitution changed. And so he wanted a bipartisan campaign, and I won't take time to go into that. But he got Tom Lambeth to be the Democrat and me to be the Republican to run the campaign. And we only won by 30,000 votes out of several million. Hugh Morton was honorary campaign chair. And you remember he owned Grandfather Mountain. And the night of the election, tell him I don't have time to talk right now, whoever it is. The night of the election, he said to Tom Lambeth and me, come on up to my room. I'm going to give you a gift. And we thought it'd be a pass to Grandfather Mountain or something, weekend at Grandfather Mountain, and he gave us a jar of honey. Now, he did give us 2 jars. We didn't have to split it, but we enjoyed that a lot. So Jim Hunt did. I was in Washington with Jim Broyhill most of Hunt 1 and Hunt 2. But I learned to know Governor Hunt in his 3rd and 4th terms very well. I think it's fair to say that Jim Hunt didn't have much of a sense of humor, and he didn't cuss very much, although I think he learned to say darn between the 2nd term and the 3rd term that he served. But we got to be really good friends, and some of you remember Casual Friday, when if you wore a tie during the week, you didn't have to wear one on Friday. So I got a call one Friday afternoon from Barbara Buchanan, his assistant. She said, Governor wants to see you. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't have on a necktie. And I just don't feel right coming in the governor's office without a necktie. She said, come on. So believe it or not, I was scared. I didn't know what to say, and you usually get in trouble. But I walked in and I said, Governor, I apologize for not having on a necktie. But I only wear a necktie when I'm meeting with somebody important. He didn't laugh quite that much. But Jim, and he later appointed me chairman of the State Board of Education, which was my favorite non-paying job. Jim Martin, I learned to know him Martin in Washington. Martin and Broyhill had offices in the Rayburn House office building, and he asked me to start working on a transition plan. He wasn't overconfident, but he wanted to be ready to start the first day after he got elected. And so I came back to Raleigh then, and Governor Martin, very brilliant chemistry professor, he'd been a county commissioner and a congressman and so on, and it was a challenge to work for because he was so smart. And I've been fortunate to work for a lot of good people, all of whom seem to be named Jim. Jim Broyhill, Jim Martin, Jim Holshouser, Jim Hunt. Jim Hurley hired me for my first job, at Jim Brady, who hired me for my last job. And by the way, my middle name is James, but it seems like they've all been named Jim. But one thing Governor Martin taught me, I came in one day to tell him why I could not get something done that he had told me to get done. And he looked up at me and he said, Mr. Kirk, and I knew I was in trouble. He never called me Mr. Kirk. He said, you got 24 hours to come back in tomorrow and tell me how you're going to get it done, not tell me how you're not going to get it done. So I've tried to remember that. Rufus Edmondson, I know some of y'all saying, doesn't he know Rufus never was governor? But he wanted to be. And second, my stories about him are much better than any you've heard before. I actually found two I could tell in public, and they're both true. Rufus went all over North Carolina in the campaign, and he said, how could anybody in North Carolina vote for Jim Martin? He wasn't even born in North Carolina. I can't believe that you would vote for a non-North Carolinian to be governor. By the way, 49% of the voters today, at least, were not born in North Carolina. But you know, in politics, you don't answer your opponent, but Governor Martin finally did. Governor Martin started making a speech. My worthy opponent, Rufus Edmondson, going all over the state, telling the truth for a change. And he said, Rufus said, I wasn't born in North Carolina. And he said, I wasn't born in North Carolina. My mother was in Savannah, Georgia, and I wanted to be near her when I was born. I knew Jim Martin was smart, but I finally remembered to ask him, where'd he get that line? And most of y'all remember Louis Grizzard, and he got it out of a Louis Grizzard column. Another one had to do with barbecue, and I'm sure some of you remember this. 2.5 weeks before the election, Rufus Edmondson said to some reporter, I hope I never have to eat any more barbecue. And the voters saw to it that he didn't. But he and I have gotten to be good friends, and he really thinks that's why he lost the election. If he wants to think that, that's fine. Mike Easley, even his friends would say, he's very difficult to figure out. He didn't appear to enjoy doing things that governors typically have to do as a part of their job. But when he actually married, his wife seemed to enjoy it a lot more than he did and was very good at it. However, when Mike Easley wanted to be effective in small groups or big ones, he did very well. My favorite Mike Easley story, which I've been told numerous times to quit telling because it's not politically correct and it's going to offend some people in the audience. So those of you who know me, I've got a little stubborn streak in me, so I keep telling it, but I'll apologize up front if I offend anybody. You get what you pay for. But before the lottery passed, I was head of the State Chamber of Commerce, and people thought we could help get the lottery through the legislature. So Governor Easley came up to me at a meeting, and he said, Phil, we want NCCCAA, it was called in, to get behind the lottery and help us get it passed. And I said, well, number one, I've taken it before our executive committee 5 times in the last 10 years, and they said we weren't going to get involved because we had members on both sides. And I said, second, I'm opposed to the lottery, so you don't want me out there talking too much about it. But I said, however, and it was just one-on-one, I would not have said this in front of a group, except now and since then, but I said, Governor, you're so much for the lottery, we could raise a whole lot more money if you get a bill through the legislature legalizing prostitution and setting up houses of prostitution all over North Carolina and put a high tax on them and hire me to be the inspector. Well, he has a very good sense of humor, and he said, well, yeah, we would need quality control, wouldn't we? Before you asked, no, he didn't call me. Beverly Perdue, one serious thing I have left in on her is not only was she the first female governor, but I'd say that she was probably the best prepared governor in our state's history. Why do I say that? A leader in the North Carolina House, a leader in the North Carolina Senate, lieutenant governor for 8 years, member of the State Board of Education, State Board of Community Colleges, and so on. And why did she not run again? Well, everybody realizes that her polling numbers were so low that she could not have gotten reelected. So then the next question is, why were her polling numbers so low? Several reasons. One thing, and McCrory had the same problem. They got tired of working with Republicans in the legislature. The only difference was McCrory and the Republicans from the same party. But also it was during a time of recession. And you don't make many people happy when you're cutting budgets. It's when you're adding money that you do it. So she had some problems that were not of her own making. Pat McCrory, I learned to know him through our Catawba College connection. We served on the Board of Trustees together at Catawba. I'll leave out some of the serious stuff, except to say that people thought he'd have it easy when he had a supermajority Republicans in the House and the Senate, and he is being a Republican. I happen to think he made his job harder because they had been in office and had their committees and so on, and they thought there was supposed to be an independent branch of government. So he had a lot of problem dealing with Republicans, particularly the first couple of years. Then he got involved in something about a bathroom. I don't remember anything about that. But he had a good sense of humor, except for a couple of weeks after the election. But my favorite McCrory story, as you could tell, I haven't been able to hold any one job very long, but I was secretary of DHHS twice. And under Governor McCrory, he had a very controversial secretary of DHHS who finally resigned. And like most politicians, prone to exaggeration, Martin and I never exaggerated, but Governor McCrory said, Secretary so-and-so is the best secretary of DHHS in our state's history. Well, since I'd done it twice, that sort of bothered me a little bit, but I don't really worry about things like that. But about a week later, I sent him an email and I said, Governor McCrory, I was really upset when you said she was the best secretary in our state's history. But then I realized you were in Charlotte not paying much attention to what was going on in Raleigh. So I said, you don't know that I was secretary once, much less twice. And I said, however, I'm going to campaign for your re-election. I've forgiven you. Within 30 minutes, I get an immediate response from the governor, and he said, I meant she was the best secretary of this century. You were last century. True. Roy Cooper, by the way, when Roy Cooper beat McCrory, I had to change the title of my speech from 9 governors to 10 governors. Just like Beverly Perdue, Roy Cooper is very well qualified to be governor, having been Attorney General, Leader of the House, a Leader of the Senate, 16 years as Attorney General. This is no disrespect, but I don't have any humorous stories to tell you about Roy Cooper, although I've lobbied him in the legislature. I was very optimistic we would have some bipartisanship. Those of you political junkies will remember that Liston Ramsey was Speaker forever, and so some Democrats wanted to help Governor Martin get rid of Liston Ramsey. And so the 20 Democrats, including Roy Cooper, helped get rid of, worked with the Republicans to get rid of a Democratic Speaker of the House. So I thought that might be a sign that we'd be able to work together. I'm afraid both sides seem to be more interested in suing each other than getting anything done. I'd also say that they've worked together on some things, but it doesn't make any news. They worked together on transportation. They worked together on teacher pay. I remember one year Cooper wanted 10%, and the Republicans wanted 9.6, so that was pretty close to the same. So when they work together, it doesn't really get any coverage, or I won't get into that speech. And I'll close by saying that in the serious way, all of the men and women that I've talked about are politicians or public servants, whichever term you prefer. And I hope you've seen that all of them are human beings. They're not perfect, just as you and I aren't perfect. Most people in politics are honest. Most people in politics spend a lot of time away from their family, a lot of sacrifice from family time. Most of them lose money, not make money. You read about the exceptions, of course. But they're all different, and I think the ones I've talked about at least are in politics for the right reason. And when you criticize them, and you have every right to criticize all public officials, I hope we do it in a more civil way than we seem to be doing things these days. But when you start criticizing the governor or president or whoever, look in the mirror and ask yourself, would I be willing to run for that office? Well, maybe when we were younger, but would I be willing to run for that office? And most of us would say no. So it's fine to criticize. I'd say offer solutions. And then my final story, which I didn't write down, so I didn't remember to say it in order, but I was going to give this speech to Charlotte Rotary Club recently. And I get a call wanting to know if it's okay to invite Governor McCrory and Governor Martin to come to the speech. And I thought, well, what was I going to say? No. So I said yes, and they came. And by the way, I said some things more critical of one of them that's got a thin skin. I won't say which one. But he was in the audience, and I didn't look at him too much when I was speaking. But I got up and I said, oh, and they're honorary members of Charlotte Rotary, so they were introduced as honorary members. And I said, Madam President, do the members, honorary members, do they have to pay for their lunch? And she said, well, of course not. And I said, well, I was worried I might get stuck with having to pay for their lunch because I've never seen either one of them pay for a meal in all the years that I've known them. Thank you.
Phil, I'm looking forward to your speech 2 years from now about the community college people I've known. Phil is a Republican, as he made no doubt about it. And I have two close friends who are Republican. One is Phil Kirk, and the other is my daughter, Lisa, who happens to be here. My daughters have learned to, I've encouraged them to think on their own, as you can see. How many 90-plus-year-old people do we have? If you hear me, I got hearing aids on. Can you hear me? 90 years old or over. Here's Raymond. Versi? Where's Versi? She's Versi Elder had to leave. Okay. It's about to close an hour, but I wanted to recognize our older people. I didn't have my advisor committee recognized. Where's Parker? You saw Parker. He's our vice chair. Reed Parrott, who's on a committee, and Ed Wilson serving, and Ray Bailey back at the back, who brought Raymond and Harley down the mountain. So they're serving on a committee, and they helped me decide that Clark Adams would be a good find, and what good work that advisory committee did. Clark, what else we got? That's it. If you have any suggestions of how we can improve next year, probably be here. We haven't said that yet, Clark. But how we can improve it, let Clark or me know, or some of our committee members. We would want your input about how things went this year and how we can improve. This has been a great year for us from my perspective, and I want to thank everyone who made the effort to be here. Bill Simpson is over here, former chairman, great chairman of the state board. Anybody else I need to recognize for sure? Okay, this is it. Have a good. Oh yes. Wake Tech has been an outstanding institution to come to, and the staff here has really been most cooperative with me in the past and Clark this year. And who we have in here right now that's from Wake Tech helping us. Video and these words. Then the president. Oh, Clark, I didn't see Steve. Stand up and show him your shoulder, please. I would like to give us, this is Scott Campus. Let's give him a hand. Hope that shoulder's getting, that's, okay, good deal. Well, we thank you, yes. Clark, you see something? Some other staff members this way? Yes, wave your hand. Thank you. Anyway, everything has been really, really nice as far as our relationship with getting things right here at Wake Tech, and we appreciate all your support. Okay, drive carefully home.